We got a big crew here today. Where's Grant? Ready to go?
Yep.
Okay, awesome. So thanks for being here today. We got a special day. We got two events for Alaska. Alaska's been on the radar screen obviously a lot this year for a whole host of reasons. This is not a follow-up to the Putin-Trump get-together, just to let you know. Okay, that's being worked in other angles. All right, but nonetheless. We were fortunate over the last several years, we meaning Alaska, to make friends with congressmen and women from other states in an effort to get them to understand what we're all about, and they helped us understand what their states are all about. So today you have a number of congressmen and women from across the country, both Democrats and Republicans, came up here to Alaska to understand it better. Some of our congressmen and women have been here before, been up on the slope before. They're taking a tour of the state. They'll be able to answer those questions. But what it does, and for you that are Alaskans, you know this, we go outside a lot, as we call it, outside the state of Alaska. We'll go down to Seattle, Chicago, Washington, all over the place. We kind of have a pretty good idea, and many of us came from other areas of the country. But oftentimes, if you've never been to Alaska, you can only imagine it, but by being here on the ground, you get to live it, you feel it, you understand it. And in that way, we can have conversations with congressmen and women that have been up here, and they can have conversations with their fellow congressmen and women as well that may not have been up here, and hopefully can correct records, hopefully can tell them their first-hand view of things up here. So it's really, really, really beneficial for us, and I really do appreciate them coming up. I appreciate Nick coming back home, as I say, as our congressman, to help with this, but I think like any educational experience, I believe that they're going to leave here knowing some things they may not have known before, dispelling some myths that they may have encountered before, but nonetheless, they're going to become somewhat, in their own way, a little experts on Alaska because they're here on the ground. So what I'd like to do at this point is introduce a man that I consider a friend, and we've had, I think, a pretty good association here the last several years, is Congressman Westerman, who's going to make a couple comments and talk about why the group is here, but make a couple comments about what they're looking at as well. But I always joke around with the congressman. I always joke around with the Senator Bozeman. When I was in rural Alaska, we would oftentimes get mail from Arkansas misdirected to Alaska because it's an AK and ARK thing. So I've never been down to Arkansas. I want to get there because I want to see where my mail used to originate from. But anyway, terrific state, Arkansas. A lot of these folks, they're all coming from terrific states. Hopefully they'll be able to share some of that with you. But I would like to have Congressman Westerman come up, say a few words, and we're just grateful. And I'm not sure where he's at.
Right here.
Thank you very much. Thanks for coming. And this is just a little bit of a representation of our great state. We like to make things big up here.
Well, thank you, Governor. Welcome, everyone. It's great to be here in Alaska. I'm Bruce Westerman, Chairman of the Resources Committee from the great state of Arkansas, which is AR. But for people in the press who didn't study hard in college, they often list my name as Bruce Westerman, AK. And we always know it's a bogus story if the headline starts with that. But I can tell you, if there's a state that I don't mind being confused with, it's the great state of Alaska. What a beautiful place you have. Governor, we've got to get you down to Arkansas, and maybe we can find some of your lost mail. I don't know where our mail is going to, but we get a lot of complaints about the postal office here as well. Now, we're really here this week to learn about Alaska, to be more informed so that we can make better decisions in the United States Congress and so that we can address issues that are not only important here in Alaska, but are important to the whole country. We are the Natural Resources Committee. Basically, everything we work on in this committee, you can find in Alaska, from energy to mining to Indian and Insular Affairs to water, wildlife. And we're trying to squeeze a lot in a week. And as you know, it's hard to see a lot of Alaska in a week, but we're getting up early and working late to make that happen. We'll be going back to D.C. next week, and I expect Alaska to still be front and center in the policy discussions that we talk about. To show you how important Alaska is, we've got around a dozen members from all across the country that came out here with us this week. And again, thank you for the hospitality. It's great to be here. I want to turn it over to somebody that you all know that doesn't need an introduction, who made it possible to line up an amazing week. Your congressman, the one and only congressman for the whole state of Alaska, Nick Begich.
Thank you. Thank you, Chairman Westerman, and thank you to my colleagues for making the trip to Alaska. You know, I like to tell folks, Alaska's not a hard sell, right? And people are very curious about our state. They're absolutely thrilled with the natural beauty of our state. And one of the things that we've tried to highlight here this week is how Alaskans care for the environment while we develop our resources responsibly. And we've certainly had an opportunity to see that down in Juneau at the Greens Creek mine, yesterday on the Kenai Peninsula at Swanson River, where we've been developing oil and gas for about 70 years inside of what is today a National Wildlife Refuge. So this is a bipartisan trip, and I really want to emphasize that. You know, we want to make sure that Alaska is developing and developing responsibly, but we need to do that in a way where we bring everyone along. And so to my Democrat colleagues, thank you for joining us on this trip to learn about Alaska, and to my Republican colleagues, thank you for those of you who are here for the first time. I hope you're enjoying your experience, and for those who are back, there's a reason they're back. Because Alaska is a great place to be, it's a great place to visit, and from my perspective, a great place to live. But I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you, and I appreciate the opportunity to feature my state. Thank you, Chairman Westerman, for prioritizing Alaska and always being a friend to our great state. As folks know and understand well in Alaska, we only have one House representative out of 435. And so it's very helpful when others understand the unique opportunities and challenges that we face in Alaska. And thank you to my friends for being here, and I will turn this back over to the governor.
Let me look at the run show here. So Grant, we're going to have some questions. What I asked the reporters, especially local reporters, if you have questions that are not specific to the congressmen and women here and specific to what we're going to do right after that, I'd be more than happy to answer those questions if they're state-related only at the end of the session, but I will answer those questions. So go ahead.
All right, we're going to start here in the room first with Iris Samuels, the Anchorage Daily News.
Thank you, and I have a question for Congressman Begich. I am curious, first, if you can talk a little bit about how, if at all, provisions in the One Big Beautiful Bill figured into this CODEL and the conversations that you're having here in Alaska right now. And then also, you've spoken very enthusiastically about that bill. You're clearly a big fan of it. So I'm kind of hoping you can talk a little bit about why it is that you haven't held kind of open to the public meetings where people can share their concerns about that bill, and you can respond to those and share why it is that you're such a big fan of it.
Yeah, I appreciate the question. The One Big Beautiful Bill Act, as many folks are learning, has a number of really important provisions in it for Alaska. We're the House Natural Resources Committee, and so within the jurisdiction of this specific committee, there's mandated lease sales. In fact, a significant amount of lease sales in NPRA, ANWR, and the Cook Inlet. And as Alaskans understand, particularly those Alaskans that live in South Central, we have a major looming natural gas shortage. And so making sure that there was federal lands available for lease to help alleviate some of that shortage, and making sure that we have a continued economic base. You know, oil and gas has been the driver for state revenue for so long in our state, and we want to make sure that continues. And so that's a big part of the One Big Beautiful Bill Act. Of course, many longtime Alaskans know that we had a promise made to Alaska at statehood, that we would receive an outsized share of our natural wealth coming from oil and gas revenues. And for the first time since the development of the Trans-Alaska Pipeline, we have increased that share of federal revenues coming to the state of Alaska. So we went from a 50-50 split with the federal government to, with these new leases, a 70-30 split. And we've been very busy in D.C. We've had a very busy calendar. It's great to be back in the state. We have held town halls. We've held town halls in Fairbanks. We've held town halls in Anchorage. Some of these town halls are specific to specific groups, so we'll be focusing on veterans, on natural resources, and on other issues. And we'll continue to talk about this message of just how good the One Big Beautiful Bill Act is for the people of Alaska, We're very interested in hearing from you, and I was actually out at the fair while I was back here in state just taking questions from folks. Constructive criticism, praise, we're welcome to receive both, and we look forward to hearing from you. Thanks.
Next, we have Will Courtney with Alaska's News Source.
Yeah, good morning. I have a question for Congressman Westerman. You mentioned that Alaska is going to be front and centered in policy discussions in D.C. when you come back into session. What's going to be front and centered, and does that include the LNG pipeline?
Thanks, Will. Great question. Again, we're the Natural Resources Committee, and Alaska is a huge component of America's natural resources. If you look at our increased demand for energy, Alaska has a lot of energy. If you look at our increased need to produce American rare earth elements and critical minerals, Alaska has pretty much all of those. We're dependent on countries like China, that's no secret, for our rare earths and critical minerals, which creates not only an economic problem but a national security problem. So that's why I say Alaska is going to be front and center. We also, we spent some time yesterday in Kenai looking at some of the projects that were done under the Great American Outdoors Act. That's another focus that the committee is going to have when we get back to Washington. And the parks, the Forest Service, and Fish and Wildlife all benefit from what we can do in the Great American Outdoors Act. So we could talk a long time about how Alaska relates to the work of the Natural Resources Committee and its Congress as a whole.
All right, next we have Liz Ruskin with Alaska Public Media.
My question is for Congressman Begich also. I wanted to ask you about the Central Yukon Resource Management Plan. I gather you're about to repeal it or vote to repeal it. Is that about advancing the Ambler Road or something?
You know, that Central Yukon Resource Management Plan was put forward by the previous administration. It locked up a lot of resources for the region. This is one of the most impoverished regions of the state. Ambler's a part of that, but I think there's a lot of other potential out there. And we heard from regional stakeholders, including Alaska Native corporations who own significant lands and have significant interests because, of course, they represent villages in the region. And based on that stakeholder feedback that we received, there was a clearly identified need to repeal that rule, and that's something that we'll be working on when we return to D.C.
Our next, we can go to the teleconference with James Brooks with the Alaska Beacon.
Hello and good morning. I talked with a few of you at the Juneau Airport on Monday and wanted to ask you again about logging, since there's some new news out of the Department of Agriculture this morning that they're going ahead with plans to repeal the 2001 roadless rule. I know a lot of you have experience with that and was hoping to get your thoughts on it, especially from Representatives Hoyle and the gentleman I talked with from Arizona and Utah as well.
Well, I'll take it. I'm Paul Gosar from Arizona. You know, the roadless rule has really handicapped us in a number of areas. We've witnessed it now in the loss of the North Rim Lodge and the big fire that is going on right now. When you restrict that, then you restrict the ability to look at a resource and harness it. Instead, we're victims of those aspects. So we need to be able to do that. And you know why we're here in Alaska? They show us that you can do both. You can be positive about both of those, having it at the same time. You know, I don't think anybody can say that it's a win-win situation when you look at the scorched earth. Remember that the temperatures exceed what is normal, and you get this in a very high combustible energy that actually desecrates. It actually takes some of the ground and scorches it where it'll never grow another thing for 50 years. That's not an asset. So we have to look at this roadless rule, make sure that there's opportunities, and we can have our cake and eat it too. Thank you.
Hi, Celeste Malloy. I'm a Congresswoman from Utah, and I come from a state that has a really high percentage of public lands, much like Alaska, and one of the complaints my constituents have frequently is that the federal government manages a lot of our resources but isn't always great at listening to the people who live amongst the resources and and what they want, what our rural communities need, and what our economies need. And this roadless rule decision is a direct result of complaints from people who live with the roadless rule about the unintended consequences it's having on economies and on resources. So I guess my statement would be that I appreciate what the administration is doing to respond to constituents and their needs.
So, Val Hoyle, I represent the central and south coast of Oregon, and I will say that my district is where the heart of the timber wars started, where people in Eugene used the Endangered Species Act to stop logging that would have taken all of our old growth. And I do think we need a balanced approach, especially in the face of climate change. I'm here, and we've got some significant fires back home, and due to the hotter and drier climates, due to climate change, we lost nearly 1 million acres last year just in our state. In terms of the roadless rule, what I would say is that I don't think an approach of all or nothing is how we should be approaching managing our forests. I know that during the negotiations for the Big Beautiful Bill, we nearly had a provision that would have allowed for privatizing our public lands. Half of my district are federal lands. And the fact of the matter is those are our lands, and I want to make sure that we manage them well, that we have the staff to manage them well. And again, I personally would like to see a more nuanced approach as opposed to going one way or the other. We have to protect our federal lands. We have to make sure that the public has access to our public lands, and we have to make sure that we aren't just wholesale taking out the protections that we worked really, really hard for, because we owe it to the people of this country to protect those lands that truly are theirs.
Next, we have Mark Sabatini with the Juneau Independent.
Hi, my question is for the Democratic members of the delegation. You're outnumbered on the trip and back in D.C. So given that, what are your objectives for this trip, and what do you hope to achieve with whatever you do get done on this trip once you go back to D.C. and take up some of this agenda?
Good morning. Sarah Elfrith, representing Maryland's 3rd Congressional District. First, I want to extend a warm thanks to my colleague and friend, Congressman Nick Begich, for organizing and inviting us here. Of course, our chair, Westerman, who always seeks to work with the minority party, the Democratic Party, in all things on the committee. I'm 8 months in Congress, and so I don't know what I don't know. This was primarily for me an opportunity to come up, listen, learn, experience everything Alaska has to offer. We've asked, really tough questions, and we're going to continue to do that over the course of this week. But again, as it's been said from folks representing both parties, this is a question of balance. How do we protect our natural resources for generations to come, while at the same time balancing the needs of the economy and the needs of Nick's constituents when it comes to things like energy security and affordability? So achieving that balance, making sure that we are as centered as we possibly can be in the policy that we're discussing, and the similarities too between our various states. I represent, along with Congressman Whitman, the Chesapeake Bay, and so a lot of similarities in terms of fisheries, in terms of water quality challenges across bicoastal across the states. Where can we learn from each other and work together and bring all that back to Washington? That's my priority this week.
Briefly. So again, Val Hoyle. I represent the central and south coast of Oregon, and we have so much in common as Pacific Northwesterners with Alaska, whether it's our commercial fishing industry, with timber, with strong, environmental protections. But fundamentally, I come from a district where you cannot get elected by just Democrats or just Republicans. 42% of my voters are not Democrats or Republicans. I personally think if we had more districts like mine, like those of Congressman Begich, we would do better in Washington. But the job of an activist, they can focus on one issue. Their job is to push people in government further than they think that we can go. My job is to represent the constituents in my district, from the Trump plus 36 part of my district where they're worried about rural health care and jobs, to the, Kamala plus 30 part of my district, right, where they want to see me fighting every single day in a way that I feel is performative. I have to show up and govern. And that means working with my colleagues and talking to them about what's important in my district and finding the commonalities. And there are so many. So being on this trip, it is, one, getting to know my colleagues, B, building up the kind of relationships that even in what I feel is a toxic relationship in DC because of hyperpartisanship, on this committee, we find ways to work together on things that matter. Again, on Native and tribal issues, so critical. On timber issues, so critical. And on environmental protections. So if we don't show up, then our voices aren't heard, and then I'm not doing the job that I was paid to do. I don't know any one of my constituents that gets paid for a job and then doesn't show up to do the work. So that's what we're doing, and I am very grateful to the governor, to Congressman Begich for this opportunity. It truly has been a great learning experience. And again, those relationships are what's going to save this country and allow us to move forward in a way that the American people expect.
Last question for this portion is Becky Bohr with the Associated Press.
Thanks. The question perhaps for the governor and Representative Begich. In the Big Beautiful Bill, among the lease sales are additional lease sales for ANWR. As you know, there weren't any major oil companies that bid in the first sale under the first Trump administration, and I know the state was critical of the parameters of the second. I'm curious what both of you think in terms of what might be different, what level of interest there is among industry in the refuge, and why there's a continued focus on trying to open up that area for development.
We're looking at each other, Becky. But I think under the previous administration, while the lease sale was the first lease sale was held, the second lease sale was canceled. Was not successful because there were so many provisions and restrictions put on those leases. And when you attach a number of obstacles to development to a lease sale, you're asking the bidder to commit to an overly restrictive and actually in some cases impossible operating environment. And so, of course, someone who's looking at a resource saying, hey, this has great potential, but I'll never be able to develop these resources under these provisions, is not going to put forward a bid. And so what we've done in the One Big Beautiful Bill Act with respect to ANWR leasing provisions removes some of those restrictions. Obviously, we have a more favorable environment politically for moving those lease sales forward. I expect that we're going to see some bids on those from private industry, and I think there's good reason for that. We've known for decades that ANWR is highly prospective for oil and gas development, and I think we're going to see some really positive developments on the North Slope as a result of that. When you speak to the one native village in that area, Kaktovik, they want development. And so when we listen to the voices of the region, they want it. When we listen to Alaskans, they want it. And we listen to industry, they recognize, and they'll tell us that there are some pretty exciting opportunities within the coastal plain for Alaska. And I'll turn it over to the governor.
Yeah, Becky, I would echo what the congressman said. You talk to the folks in Kaktovik, and they're excited about the prospects. The inherent in the question, and I know, Becky, that it's a question that is resonating across the country. If investors didn't want to invest in ANWR then, why would they invest now? To be honest with you, when I talk to investors in the oil industry, they didn't feel that the support was there from the last administration. They didn't feel that there'd be the ability to do seismic, the ability to actually get in there and start to do the work. And so what has happened in this country over the last several decades, to be perfectly honest with you, is investors have been whipsawed so badly from one administration to the other, they're not sure what to think about the next 4 years. And that was one of the things I said to a number of federal legislators, and that is, we got 4 years under a different administration that is pro-development, but will that last? And how do we make sure that things like litigation aren't going to be used as lawfare? How do we know that the permitting process won't be used to drag things out? It takes 27 years sometimes in America to get a mine from initial discovery to actually producing. That's crazy. The Trans-Alaska Oil Pipeline was built in 2 years. 2 years. And so the best way to answer that is, if you're an investor and you're contingent, you're dependent upon a federal government to be benevolent and let that investment go through, and it's going to take many, many years for that to happen, and you don't think it might, because what was happening at that same time, Becky, although the Biden administration supported our gas pipeline, and I'm grateful for that, at the same time they were putting the kibosh on exports of gas out of the country. So it's uncertainty that caused that. If the investors think that there's certainty that their investment will be allowed to take root and grow, I think you'll see more of it. But we'll find out. When these lease sales go out, we'll find out what investors are thinking. But I don't think the question is whether there's oil or gas there. I think most people believe there's oil and gas. We don't know what quantities at this point. But it's really about investor confidence in what the federal government is going to do, because it's on federal land.
And Governor, we'll turn it back to you and the Permitting Council.
So before we go to the Permitting Council, I want to recognize our Lieutenant Governor, Nancy Dahlstrom, that's standing here quietly. Thank you, Nancy. And I want to thank everyone behind me. I think there were some key statements made by both folks on both sides of the aisle. We have a tremendous opportunity in this country to develop resources the right way. We are an energy resource giant like no other. And I think we're going to get there by talking to each other across the aisle, and being able to listen and have those conversations that talk about permitting, that talk about regulation, that talk about where do you put a resource play, and to make sure that the environmental regulations are there to make sure that America leads in that front across the world. And so I want to thank you all for coming up, and we want you to come up again and bring some more of your friends, only because we feel that we're not really understood in this country and across the world. I find that when I talk to foreign investors in Asia or Europe or the United Emirates. I find that out when I talk to folks down south. They have an idea about Alaska that's generally put together by TV shows, discovery shows, and press, etc. But in the end, coming here, I can guarantee you, because I've talked to some of you that came up here before, you're going to leave here with a different impression. But it'll be one formed by your own experiences as opposed to somebody else telling you what's going on. So with that, I'm going to have Emily come up. This is the second part of our show. So Emily's going to describe exactly what she does and what is happening here. But Emily is working for the Federal Permitting Council that deals with a lot of the permits that we need to do resource development in Alaska. Emily was recently appointed, and she came up during the energy conference. And we had a great conversation. I met Emily several months, I think it was at least several months, maybe a year before that, in a different setting. But nonetheless, after appointment, I said, Emily, why don't we get together and put our heads together and come up with a process that is as seamless as possible between your agency and our state government. And we talked about that because there are many permits that have to happen across different agencies, both in the state and at the federal level. And oftentimes what happens is there's disconnects, there are delayed conversations that need to happen. The Trump administration saw this in their first term. They wanted to rectify this in the second term. So they put together this outfit that Emily will talk about. But the long story short is we had a great conversation. It was sort of a challenge to Emily, but it was one that she was eager to take up. And that was, let's put together a pilot project. Let's let our agency and the federal government work with the state of Alaska and see what we can come up with to make things expeditious, to streamline things, to eliminate duplication. So again, that investors in these projects feel that they can get to a project sooner than later with the safeguards in there for the environment, but not with any unnecessary delays or people dropping the ball. So Emily, I'm going to have you come up and talk about what you do and how you view this project that we're working on.
Thank you, sir. It's great to be here today and excited. You know, I was appointed by the president 3 months ago to run the Federal Permitting Council. This is my second trip to Alaska in those 3 months, and I hope that shows the priority that we're bringing to this partnership with the state. Today, we're going to be signing a first of its kind memorandum of understanding between the Permitting Council and the state of Alaska. Permitting Council is a small agency. We're a small federal agency charged with helping large infrastructure projects get through federal permitting. That tells you a little bit of something about the federal permitting process and how long it takes and how complicated it is, that you need an agency dedicated to help people navigate it. But we recognized that, number one, Alaska, I think, has been neglected by previous administrations, and President Trump really firmly believes that we need to fix that in every way possible. So starting with that conversation with the governor, we developed this concept of having this MOU so that we could partner from the ground up on federal projects. The Permitting Council has a number of projects from Alaska on our dashboard today. We want to triple that number by working with the folks at the permitting offices here in Alaska to identify projects early and often that can benefit from the kind of help the Permitting Council can give them as they get to federal permitting. So often we've really emphasized mining in this time, and so often we see projects that don't anticipate the federal permitting that they need down the line, and that causes delays along the process. We want to help fix that with this MOU. So it'll allow us to partner early to identify projects. It'll allow us to provide expertise and value to the state through looking at best practices and technology implementation to help streamline their permitting process. And it'll allow us to learn from the incredible value that you all bring to the table with your permitting expertise. I've learned going across the state that this is, it's truly the last frontier. It is different than every other state in the union. And we want to lean on your expertise of your resources and the value you bring. So we hope that this will be the first of many agreements with states across the country. So Alaska, once again, we're putting you first. We want to use this opportunity to build and to provide more opportunity to developers in the state. And I'm really excited to work with you going forward. So ready to sign.
Grant, we're going to ask questions?
We'll do the signing, and then we'll do questions.
Okay. Do we want to move this out of the way and move this? This is it? We're nailed here?
Yep.
If you guys want to come over, if you want to be part of this, that'd be great. But this MOU is a beginning, which I think, as Emily said, and that was our discussion, let's start it here, but let's expand it across the country to all the states that have this opportunity. And what we can do, the hope is come up with a common understanding on timelines, on routing, on duplication, so that it will make sense to investors instead of just being a myriad of confusion. So I want to thank Emily, I want to thank President Trump, and we're going to start something new, and the press should, and they're probably thinking, is this going to really go anywhere? Ask us in a few months where it's at, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So it's not just a show. Yeah, let's trade. Okay, you're gonna leave that out too? I will too. A little data. So today being the 27th.
I had to look at my watch.
Yeah. Did you did it for me?
I did. It's the first part of our team effort.
Yeah, see, there we go, it's seamless, right? So anyway, this is the beginning of what we think is going to be something that the whole country could use, all the states can use, and to make it simpler and better. In the last, a couple years ago, Joe Manchin, Democrat senator from West Virginia, and Senator Barrasso from Wyoming, both states that really do a great job, I think, in resource development and protecting the environment, tried to get a bipartisan bill passed on permitting. And it almost made it, but it didn't quite get across the finish line. It's our hope that this is part of that conversation and that there's a larger effort by the federal officials in Congress and in the Senate to do something like that. Because whether you are whether you believe in fossil fuels, whether you believe in renewables, we all believe in protecting the environment. By getting together and making things a little more streamlined helps everybody. Helps the consumer get low-cost electricity, helps us get cheaper minerals and metals, helps ensure our national security. So this is a beginning, and I just want to thank you for this. And it's terrific. So we're going to ask questions. They're going to be able to ask questions.
If I could get a photo with you, don't mind holding it up. Yeah, perfect.
there. And Emily, let's go back up here. They're probably going to ask you questions first.
We'll continue with questions from the phone. First, we have Shane Lasley with Mining News North. Shane, if you have a question, go ahead. We'll move on to Thomas Catanacci with Washington Free Beacon. We will go on to Stephen Lee with Bloomberg Environment. Stephen, if you have a question, go ahead. We'll move on to James B. Colles
Great.
with
I can just tell you more
Politico.
about it.
Must be a perfect bill.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Yes, thank you. James Michaelis, I'm with Politico. Thanks for doing this. I have a question for you, Emily, and also for the governor. On the question of permitting, there have been some efforts by the Interior Department to require more steps in the permitting process for wind and solar projects, reviewed by the Secretary on various steps. And I wanted to get your reaction to that and, whether you have any concerns that'll slow down projects in Alaska. That's something that Senator Murkowski has expressed some concerns about.
So I can start with this. I think, I certainly won't question the Department of Interior's efforts. They're going through a rigorous process to make sure that they hit all of the appropriate steps in federal permitting for a range of technologies. Here in Alaska, frankly, we're really focused on the mining projects that the last administration forgot. We went from having one mining project on the federal permitting dashboard to having over 30 or 39 projects now today, some of which are here in Alaska, because we're really emphasizing a sector that the Permitting Council could have served over the last 4 years and did not serve. So I think when we think about this partnership here with Alaska, it's an opportunity to say, okay, where are all of these sectors that have been stuck in the process, and how can we get them moving more quickly with more predictable processes? I think that's true, just as true for renewables as it is for our traditional, our oil and gas sector and our mining sector, and that's part of what we bring to the table with this really transparent process.
Yeah, there's. I'll just, I guess, add a little thought on this. I know that there's been discussions about how the money was going to be spent, what was included in that money. I think that was part of the original concern on reviewing the renewables and solar and wind. Alaska has about 3,800, I think, estimated gigawatts of power, including wind, solar, geothermal, tidal right outside here. So, we have a real opportunity. We have a lot of potential to benefit from that. But I guess the question that some in the federal government and some of the agencies are looking at is whether that cost per kilowatt is worth it in some areas, and what's going to be involved, I guess, going forward in the permitting process. And that you're going to have to ask those folks directly. But I think we all see opportunities in that area, but we also see opportunities in the fossil fuel areas like we're doing here in the state of Alaska with our oil renaissance as well as our gas line.
This is Bruce Westerman. I just wanted to let you know that we've got a bipartisan bill called the SPEED Act that's really looking at how to streamline permitting so that we can get these projects moving. And the goal of the SPEED Act is to have if you will, a blind process where it's independent of technology, it's independent of what kind of energy or what kind of infrastructure project you're trying to develop, but it gives everybody a fair shot to come in and get a permit done in a relatively short amount of time. This will be beneficial to traditional energy, to new kinds of energy. It'll be beneficial to transmission projects, both for oil and gas and for electricity. It'll be beneficial when we look at doing things like building infrastructure in our country, and it'll also be beneficial to managing our forests. So this is something that's needed. We've got a robust environmental law system in our country. It's done a great job of saving endangered species. It's done a great job of cleaning our air and cleaning our water. But we know that we can have great economic development and a healthy, safe, and clean environment as well. And I think that's why we've got bipartisan support and we'll have that in both the House and the Senate. I worked with Senators Barrasso and Manchin last year, and we couldn't quite get over the finish line, but I think we've got an opportunity to do that this year.
Next, we have Maydeen Marino with the Washington Examiner. If you have a question, go ahead.
Hi, yeah, this question's probably for Emily. I was just wondering if you could talk a little bit about like what practical outcomes do you expect from this agreement in the next year in Alaska? I don't know if you could talk a little bit more specifics about certain projects you're hoping to kind of push forward.
Yeah, so I think we see this as a way to really grow our existing relationship with the state of Alaska. We have 5 projects on the dashboard now that we've been able to provide transparent and clear permitting timelines for. We really want to grow that number. There's so much opportunity here, particularly in the sort of the mining development sector, but in other sectors too, where projects, frankly, are getting stuck in the process, where the federal government doesn't have the opportunity to access that state expertise and knowledge that we need to be able to build our permitting in a quick way, and be efficient, and frankly where we can perhaps provide some expertise and best practices to the state to speed the state permitting process. So much of this is really identifying potential projects early and often, and then providing that transparency so project developers can get out and raise the kind of capital they need to develop the resources here in this state. I think it's wonderful to stand here with the members of Congress, because I really do think permitting is one of those problems we all have to come to the table to solve. The Trump administration is really leaning in on trying to be efficient and effective in getting federal permits done in the next 3 years. The state is leaning in to take this opportunity to really develop their incredible resources, and Congress is coming to the table to fix the problems that the various executives really can't solve on our own, like the judicial review timelines that make it so hard for us to get projects done. So I really see this as an opportunity to get more projects, that sort of transparency and predictability that you can get through Fast 41, and hopefully to help the state do their job better on the other end.
Next, we have Henry Lazenby with the Northern Miner. If you have a question, go ahead. All right, we do have more questions in the room. Next, we have Ira Samuels with the Anchorage Daily News.
Thank you, and I have a question for the governor. I'm wondering if there are specific resource development projects that you can think of in recent history that would have benefited if this MOU had been in place.
I think there's a number of mining projects that folks are looking at now that, with the execution of this MOA and MOU and then the resulting hard concrete changes, I think you'll see more investment come to the state of Alaska. Compared to British Columbia, they probably have 3 to 4 times as many resource plays in terms of mines than we do. The Fraser Institute, because of the work we've done internally, just rated us, I think, a couple weeks ago as number 3 in the world for permitting of resource projects, especially mining. There's been a lot of work internally on that. But I think through this process, what we're really dealing with is the question that Becky had on ANWR, and that is, every time I talk to an investor, they'll say, it's great, Dunleavy, you guys are working on your internal permitting, and it's great you're working on this, so you're great it's working on that. But what we have to do is get certainty at the federal level as well as the state level that if we're going to commit, if we're going to go to FID or want to even get there, that there's going to be certainty that there's something at the end of that it's not going to be delay. So the hope is that this clears that up so we get more and more investment. And I'll just add, the president's trying to do everything he can to bring investment back to the United States. We see that in all these tariff and trade talks. The last thing the president's going to need and we're going to need is some of these foreign investors saying, you asked us to put money in the United States of America in places like Alaska, but your permitting processes and your lawfare is not going to help us return $1 on our investment. So, in answer to your question, I'm not trying to evade the question. I think we could have had a lot more investment in the state of Alaska and a lot more mining activity if we had a streamlined, quick, understandable, and permitting process with certainty on timelines and results.
But are there specific projects that have occurred, say, earlier?
I'm sure there are. I'm being honest with you. I'm sure there are mining concerns right now, screaming through their phones, saying our project, Dunleavy, or this project. But I think that's better answered by the actual investors that either haven't invested in the state of Alaska or would. that would be the best way to answer, to be honest with you.
Last question is Mark Sabatini with the Juneau Independent.
Hi, this is probably a question for Emily, perhaps for the governor and the delegation as well. I want to put this memorandum in the context of President Trump's day one executive order that essentially stated that any regulations that prevented maximum utilization of the state's natural resources would be repealed, rescinded, whatever. My question is why would this be needed, or what will it achieve that his executive order isn't? And perhaps along those lines, to what extent has that executive order achieved any of its goals so far?
Well, I'll answer and then hand it over to Emily. This is Dunleavy. Anyone that has dealt with a bureaucracy, and you're dealing with large numbers of people layered throughout a government, you understand that when a governor or a president or someone at the top makes a declaration that this is what they want to see for policy going forward, that you can't assume that's going to be done at the speed and in the manner that you intended. So what needs to happen are things like this that reiterate that over and over again to folks within the organizations, within the different agencies, to remind folks of the executive order, and then to help streamline some of the processes that are in the executive order. You'll have good people in the bureaucracy say to us, if we change this, or if we change this process, or when we bring this permit that has to have 2 agencies sign off on it, the other agency's a little slow to do this. This just reiterates in stronger terms that this stuff needs to happen quickly and in a certain manner so that we can once again instill confidence in anyone that's investing or even pondering a resource play. So Mark, an executive order by itself is absolutely terrific. It wakes people up. But then now it's the execution through the actual administration that needs to happen. And that's where I feel this MOU is going to help a lot, but I'll let Emily and others talk to that.
Yeah, I think the governor hit the nail on the head here. The Permitting Council, again, it exists to help project developers navigate the federal government's complex permitting process. We are here to help project developers get through the process. We often find ourselves, particularly in this iteration of the Trump administration, as the tool to execute on the White House's agenda. So we're here to help projects get through. When we get told, hey, prioritize mining, we go out and find mining projects and make sure they get through federal permitting. When we get told, hey, prioritize Alaska, we come up with new ways to prioritize that relationship and to make sure that we're using our tools to help Alaskan projects. So I really think this is, to the governor's point, it's an extension of that day one executive order to prioritize this relationship, and it's one more way that we can help to streamline the process to get more things built during the Trump administration. That's our goal. We want to permit as many things responsibly as we can during this administration.
And this is Nick Begich. Alaska is a giant in the resource space. And you know how you bind a giant? One little thread at a time. And that's what we've dealt with from the federal government, from not just my perspective, from the perspective of industry that has worked so hard for so many years to develop the resources of Alaska responsibly. Sometimes we hear that there are many within the federal government down in Washington, D.C., thousands of miles away from Alaska, that are not looking for ways to say yes, they're looking for ways to say no. And all it takes is one person in one cubicle thousands of miles away to stop what is happening in our state, to deny the people of Alaska the wealth of our resources. And when we have a federal government that's coming to the table saying, how do we get to yes? How do we help you develop these resources? That's huge for Alaska. And we should welcome that. We should be excited about that. And I know I am, and I know that the governor is as well.
This is Harriet Hageman from the state of Wyoming. I've spent decades dealing with the federal regulatory burden in this country. And one of the things that you find is that these processes are not done simultaneously. So you may have to have a particular document that must be signed by one person in one cubicle, and then that document must go to 7 more desks for approval. You have that both at the state and the federal level. And so when you have the opportunity for the state and the federal agencies to work together so that they can be working on things simultaneously, it can shorten the procedure pretty dramatically. It also makes it so that exactly what those regulatory requirements are that are coming out of Washington, D.C. are at the forefront of the discussion at the state level for these projects as they are moving forward. I've done a speech for years called Regulation Without Representation. The federal regulatory burden in this country is $2.1 trillion every single year, and that's probably a lowball estimate. But part of that has to do with these agencies not being able to work together and the wall that has been built between the federal and the state regulatory process. When I learned about this morning, I was very excited because I recognized that this might actually be a solution to so many of the problems that my clients, when I was in private practice, had encountered for decades trying to get projects permitted. I think that this is an incredible development. It will not only help Alaska, but it will help states like Wyoming and many other states that are looking for permitting and have to go through both a state and federal process.
Yeah, just let me add one more thing to that. Mark, the other thing that's happened is just in the last couple of years, there's been tremendous change, and as a result, there's a lot of flux in the bureaucracies in D.C. What do I mean by that? You had Supreme Court rulings. Somebody help me with the Supreme Court ruling from Utah on the railroad. Then there was Chevron. Then there was Sackett. So what you have are good people in the bureaucracy saying, okay, what do these rulings mean? What does it mean going forward? So it's not like the regulations have been static and understood by everybody and that there's a standard by which people operate. A lot of those regulations, there was a lot of subjectivity attached to it. Now there's got to be clarification because of the Supreme Court ruling and the work that Congress is going to do. So having somebody in there, and Emily could be considered a permitting czar, to cut through things and get the definitions quickly put together so that, again, we have investors saying, do we have to wait for clarification from the Supreme Court's rulings? Do we have to wait for this? Do we have to wait for that? This process hopefully cuts through the bureaucracy, cuts through the time, and adds certainty.
And Mr. Governor, wrap up.
Okie dokie. So it's, again, always great to have policymakers come to Alaska, policymakers that will have an impact on policy associated with Alaska. We have all the resources in the world we need right here. We have everything. We have renewable energy, we have fossil fuel energy, we have timber, we have fish, we have some of the most incredible amounts of resource here. We believe we are a solution to the country's problem and the world's problem. Alaska was admitted into the Union under an idea that they would develop their resources. 60% of Alaska's land within our borders is owned by the federal government in various guises. We have state lands, and we have our native corporation lands and some other landowners as well. But to help with America's national security, to help with reducing the cost of energy, maybe even housing through timber, to help with all of these things, you got to have some coherency in your permitting process. There was a time, many, many years ago, that if you wanted to build something, you build it. Here in Alaska, if you want to blow it up, you blew it up. If you want to use a cat on a side of a mountain, you could still see the cat trails. As a matter of fact, I was just four-wheeling on a couple of them here this weekend. Times have changed. We understand that there needs to be more concern given to the environment. But what's happened is some of those environmental safeguards, for some of us, have been distorted into lawfare and a drawn-out permitting process. The result of that is we're offshoring our key industries. We're offshoring our key metals, minerals, rare earths, you name it. And we're at a disadvantage now. It's like we went to sleep, we woke up, and we finally realized that we've put ourselves at a disadvantage. What the administration is trying to do, what a number of the folks here today are trying to do, and what we're trying to do, is kind of add balance, as was said earlier. You got to add balance to this so that we remain a strong country, a country that can provide opportunity for its people, a country that can provide low energy costs for its people, jobs for its people, and make sure that our national security is taken into consideration. We believe in this country, it's not an either-or proposition. Just like in this state, we don't believe it's an either-or proposition. We believe we could do both really well. And I'm hoping that these folks leave here today, or when they are going to leave, and say, I didn't know that. As a former teacher, I always like to ask people, what did you learn today? What was the aha moment? And I hope when they leave and they go back and they talk to their colleagues and their constituents, that they're a little bit more of an expert on Alaska by being here. And you gotta be here to tie together all the things you read and hear. You gotta be here to see it. And so I just am very grateful that they're here. I would invite them up again often. And I wanna thank Emily. It's great to have somebody with a new set of eyes on a problem, because they believe that anything is possible, and that's what this country was all about. It's opportunity and possibilities. And to have her come up here and say, come to the energy conference and say, let's work together on some stuff. That idea about joint permitting and a joint permitting process is a great idea. I think it honors Alaskans, but I also think it honors the idea that, again, we can always do better. We can always be better. And I think that's what this is about. I think that's what the administration in Washington is about. And I think that's what the folks behind me of both parties is about. How do we make things better for our people? So I'm just glad they're here. And Emily, I'm glad you're here. And so with that, I want to thank you.